Hi, Crawford.
Good afternoon. How are you, Nicole?
Doing well. How are you?
Well, as usual, I'm doing fine. You're a busy lady.
I know.
Holy smoke.
Mhm.
Hey, everybody.
Good afternoon. Glad you can make it.
Same here. Likewise.
By the way, Nicole, I got your email earlier this week, and I will make sure that we have an agenda item on the data subcommittee agenda about presenting.
The mayor's conference.
Yep.
Perfect. Exciting.
Hi, everyone. I know it's 3 o'clock, and I'm figuring we should just give chance still for folks to continue to come in. I'm Jeff, and chair of the subcommittee. Just about everybody I know, but actually Kiki and Crawford, I think perhaps it'd be the first time that we're coming in contact. So glad you are here, and we'll make sure that we can reach quorum before we get going.
Hi, Jeff, just to be clear, I want to make sure you know that I am Issa's proxy going forward for probation.
Oh, you know what? I didn't know that. Hi.
It just occurred to me that this is new developing information that you might not know.
Yeah, I probably in an email somewhere, and I'm just wasn't aware. But now I'm seeing CCC probe, and that makes sense to me. Hi,
Okay.
I'm Jeff.
Hi.
And hi, Marcus.
We have quorum now.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. And I think maybe even so, we'll give another couple, is my sense, but not too much longer because we've got folks here and respecting everyone's time. Can I ask if, not anyone in particular specifying, but if there were others in the subcommittee who had confirmed that they were coming? Is there expected other?
We
Not
don't really do RSVPs.
Okay.
I have the invite and people accept it just to have it on their calendars, but we have.
Right. Okay. It's not exactly that. Sure.
That was the second time someone asked me that today. So.
Huh. Yeah.
To,
I guess that's true for me also. If I indicate accept, there's still a possibility I might not. But.
I guess there's a standing agreement that if you can't come, you tell us, but yeah.
Right. And ideally more than 15 minutes in advance. I'll just say parenthetically here that before we do begin, I had messaged Chris and Nicole at about, I don't know, 2:30 to say, boy, I was expecting we were going to be getting a verdict much sooner. This is strange. And just before, so I was in the middle of a jury trial, and that jury just completed, and I got here right under the radar. So, hi, making that transition. And I think we are at quorum. Let's begin then, right? We have small enough of a group that we can maybe just briefly reintroduce ourselves, and then get going with our agenda. So I'm Jeff. I'm sitting as a representative of the Racial Justice Coalition, Contra Costa. I'm a steering committee member of that group and have been involved with them since 2014. And I'm also not sitting as a deputy public defender, but I am a deputy public defender. And I've been working with this office in Contra Costa since 2007. And really glad to be here to be working on the subcommittee all together. And I think what I will do then is just invite Kiki to introduce.
Thank you. I'm Kiki Williams. I'm a probation manager. I've been with this department for almost 18 years. Presently, I am directly in charge of juvenile investigations, juvenile placement, as well as adult felony investigations and a number of other et ceteras, as most of us probably are. I just, as a matter of information, also sit on the JJCC subcommittee for prevention, intervention, and community engagement. I think I got the acronym right, PICE. So I know several people from those other functions, as well as many other things that we're all involved in. And as I said, in case anybody missed it, I have been tagged it. So I will be representing probation on this subcommittee going forward.
Thanks, Kiki. Well, at least I'm glad for us that you've been tagged it. And it seems like there's a lot of overlap in some of this work. So that'll be great to have your knowledge of what's happening in those other spaces to bring to us. How about Marcus? Taking a moment to introduce.
Sure. Marcus Walton, Director of Communications and Special Projects with the Contra Costa County Office of Education, as the proxy for Superintendent of Schools, Lynn Mackey.
Thanks, Marcus. How about Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. Stephanie Medley with the Rise Center and also our job member. And I'll pass to Chris.
She wanted to say co-chair, but she can't say that anymore. That's why she paused.
Always honorary.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris James with the W. Haywood Burns Institute, contracted to consult with, provide technical assistance to the county around the RJOB and the really crucial work that this group was commissioned to do. And I would just add, Jeff, that you actually sent your email at 1:30, so cut yourself a little bit of slack. That was a decent amount of notice to say it was something that was sort of pressing. So good job.
Generous of you, Chris. Thank you. I appreciate that. How about Nicole?
Hi, my name is Nicole Popchak. I'm with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Hi. And Jill?
Hi there, and hello again to those of you that I have seen on other meetings already today. Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
Glad you're here. And Crawford? Hi.
Good afternoon. I'm Crawford Carpenter. I'm a CAB member, and I'm here to participate when you have your public comment session.
Great. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
So I think nearly everyone in our group, let me just ask, we're small enough, this is like, I think, agile, small enough of a group that I could just say, would it be worthwhile, Crawford and Kiki, for me to give, I usually give like a 3-4 minute intro in the background of how do we get here from the task force and recommendations to where we are. But I certainly know Chris and company maybe might want to mute me for a few minutes because I do almost the same thing every month. But would that be worthwhile?
No, thank you. Why don't you
Okay.
proceed? That's
Okay.
fine.
Then we'll chat offline. It's basically things I would be taking from the county website, but trying to distill because there's so much content that's there. But really, it is pretty comprehensive if you're looking at the summary exec docs of where we've arrived now based on those recs and all the stakeholders over time. So yeah, a broad array of stakeholders and really a largely consensus model that we've had. Perfect. Thanks for sending the agenda packet in the link or in our chat, Nicole. And I think I'll do the screen share as I was doing before. Seemed like that was worthwhile-ish last time, just so that folks have that immediately in front of them as we're talking about it. I think that can sometimes be useful. No major surprises, so let me give that a try. Okay. Certainly all folks are only seeing my no client information. I'm just confirming that's correct. We look like we're good. So the step now, I think we've just done our intros and announcements. Crawford, if you'd like, this would be the time where we would go through public comment, and you're welcome to speak now or later, but this is the moment if you'd like.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm reaching out to our job, looking really for guidance. I'm a member of CAB, as I stated early, though I'm speaking as a private citizen. I recently attended the Policy and Budget Subcommittee meeting of CAB, where I raised a question regarding vetting of those tasked to protect us and a query if they are possibly involved in fringe organization. The same issue was also raised at the past CAB meeting. Upon reflection, the CAB chair did not feel that this issue would fall under their particular purview, but suggested that it might fall under the jurisdiction of our job. I'm now reaching out to your board with the hope of moving this issue forward. Finally, it's most important to note that I believe that the vast majority of those involved in our criminal justice system, our system and charged with protecting us are dedicated and well-intentioned public servants. However, I remember the saying by, I think it was Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make these comments and to see if there's an opportunity to move forward.
Thank you, Crawford. I appreciate you bringing your comment and these issues to us, or this specific issue to us. I think it's appropriate, or at least I'm interested in taking a moment to respond in terms of what anyone in the group has thoughts on this. I think in particular, given that it's come to us after having, or you're coming to us after having been referred specifically in a different county agency or county advisory body, that it warrants our taking a moment now to at least express whether we think that this is an appropriate issue for us to address, or whether it might actually be more appropriately addressed elsewhere. And if, maybe I can just ask to clarify before I'd invite others to weigh in. If I'm understanding right, this would be looking into the issue of whether persons that are in law enforcement might have involvement in perhaps a hate group or something along those lines. Does that sound what you were meaning, referring to?
That is correct. And to be more specific, when I made the reference to fringe organizations, I was thinking of Proud Boys, for example, Oath Keepers, Boogaloos, white nationalists, QAnon, neo-Nazis, etc., or any other groups referenced by the FBI.
Thank you for that clarification. Maybe before I say more, I would invite anyone else from subcommittee if they'd wish to express thoughts on whether this is our territory and how we might respond.
Thank you, Crawford, for your comments. I think the first thing that popped in my head is that if we were to take this up, this would be something that would need to go to the full body, not just the subcommittee. And I think it would need to be a discussion. I'm not sure if there are some more specific things that maybe CAB has done any research on specifically with our county, but that would be good information to have. And if we are to have a discussion about this, it would be, I think, with the larger body.
Thanks, Stephanie. I agree. I think that in order for there to be any sort of concrete action, it would need to go to the full body. And maybe the question is whether we take any sort of preliminary things here, but I completely agree with what you're saying, that it would need to be first. And maybe just to invite Crawford to go back to you, was there any sort of discussion, research, more detail that came at CAB on this?
Let me unmute there, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Basically, we only had our discussion at that subcommittee, and then we moved it to, that was the Policy and Budget Committee, and then we went to the general CAB meeting, and they were kind enough to listen, but I guess upon reflection, the chair felt it would be more appropriate that it wasn't under their purview. So there really wasn't what I would call discussion, and to possibly come to your body to see if this would basically fall under your umbrella or something you could move on.
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Crawford. Just a question along the lines of, I guess, what I think folks are getting at, but wanting to ask specifically if there have been any underlying incidents or specific occurrences that have led to the ask, or if it's more of a general, obviously this is something that, you know, is important and would be, you know, I think something that, you know, folks in the county should definitely know about and should, you know, move. But is it more of a general concern, or is it, was it based on some specific underlying occurrence?
Basically a general concern. I don't have a specific incident that either I was involved in or loved ones involved in, etc. But just as a citizen, I think it's time for us to ask those questions, or that particular question. But these are public servants. These people are paid by our tax dollars. And I just felt it was a question that needed to be asked.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree, speaking for myself, not necessarily for anyone else, but I'm inclined to agree. I was just curious if something else was prompting it.
Yeah, I might add, when my grandson went to school, he was going to a private school in Concord. Before I could go and relate or interact with the students, I had to be vetted by, believe it or not, the FBI. And they had all types of vetting that I had to go through. My wife, who was a retired teacher, also had to go through various vetting. And I'm just thinking, well, isn't it time to at least ask the question because of the times that we're currently living under?
Hey,
Thank
Stephanie,
you.
I'm wondering if
Please.
the new Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, the listening sessions that are being done right now, if this could be a place where Crawford would be invited to a listening session to be. I don't know, I feel like that might be one avenue to continue to voice this concern for Crawford. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I definitely think that that could be a place to voice concerns, because I think, you know, in general, looking at how we're addressing racial equity in the county is part of that office. I kind of feel that that's just one piece, though,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Let me chime in to raise, you know, I think we're trying to get a sense of, is this an issue that exists in our county in some way? I mean, I've asked that in a different way when we were starting this whole process of like, why should we be different than anywhere else in the country? But that said, I want to also just kind of come to every situation with humility. I'm not suggesting that anyone else isn't, but that I don't know what processes may already be in place in terms of there being some sort of reference check, and in order for a person to come into the position doesn't mean that it's adequate, thorough, and that we have all information. But, you know, to your point, Crawford, maybe this is something that should be looked into, and perhaps it is. But right, I'm wondering, Kiki, if maybe you have input on this point, just in terms of not speaking for other agencies, but your knowledge of what might already exist.
My first thought was that might be an incredibly hard thing to determine, right? Because a lot of times I don't think that information or association about folks is necessarily out there in the public. So it might be a really, I don't even want to say forensic, but like a forensic level, you know, dive into someone's history. But what I suspect is that agencies do things very differently. I know that's even true for probation agencies as far as backgrounds and things like that. I've heard stories of colleagues who work for other counties where they were being hired, and, you know, folks came to their home and asked, you know, very impromptu to look through their cell phone. And, you know, so lots of different, it's just, you know, we're 58 different counties and tons of different cities and so many different agencies on top of that. there's no telling, how differently the investigations and things are happening just within our county with the agencies that we have here. So I think that would probably be a little bit of the piece of the challenge, even trying to move in that kind of direction. And it would certainly call for some uniformity among various different, differently abled and performing agencies. And that's just kind of my initial thought. I think it's worthwhile information to have, certainly, but I just imagine actually carrying it out might look really differently. And there might be some that are doing that dive, and really taking meticulous looks into things versus others that are not. I just think it would look really different.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Crawford, I see that you've unmuted. Is there something, would you like to add?
No, I think, first of all, thank you for the discussion, Kiki, particularly your comments and yours, Jeff, et cetera, and Chris. It's just a concern that I have. I've got a grandchild, and I worry about him, and I just want to make sure that that we have certain steps, or that there are certain steps that we go through on a vetting process, and particularly with those in law enforcement. And, we're tasked with worrying about people coming out of the, the prison system. I'm worried about those going into it. It's like, what do we build, schools or prisons? And I'm for building schools, not prisons. And when you take a look at this, I just want to make sure I'm not worried about the 98% that are good. I'm concerned about that 2% that slipped through the cracks, and then there's a person of color winds up in the justice system. That's my concern. And he or she winds up in that system because the particular officer or officers have not been properly vetted.
Thank you again, Crawford. I do again appreciate you bringing this to us. Before maybe I have proposal for next step on this, before we move to next item, I just want to invite Marcus and or Jill to chime in if you'd like. No pressure, but invitation.
So acknowledging that we are way beyond the scope of public comment, I absolutely recognize the concerns, and I think they are important to consider, and also remind the group that you're advisory to the Board of Supervisors, and there's one police jurisdiction that covers, and to a limited extent, given our sheriff is an elected official.
Thanks, Jill.
And Jeff, I'll just say, Mr.
Please.
Carpenter, thank you for bringing this up, and hopefully it can be and will be addressed in the right form at the right time, because it needs to be.
Thank you, Marcus. So I'm really glad that we've had the opportunity to chime in on this. I think each of us now have had at least a few words, and my thought is that having heard from folks, that this isn't so obvious, and that's kind of what I wanted to check in particular with Kiki on, or Jill, to be like, well, this is exactly how this is. We have some sense of an answer. This group's already working on it. It seems like it will be somewhat complicated, and I think we have to have limited or manage our expectations of what can be accomplished in this by this group. And that said, my proposal would be to add this to our agenda as an item to follow up upon at our next monthly meeting. And if there is capacity, I'm interested in knowing if we could have a report to the committee that's looking in briefly of what already exists in terms of
Jeff, not to
yes,
interrupt you, but I do
please.
think that this is a greater issue that goes to the full board because you all don't necessarily come up with your own work plan. You have a work plan that's directed from the full body. And I think that this is an important discussion given the variety of people who sit at that larger table that extend beyond the county. I do think that there could be an agenda item added to that agenda, something to the effect of what sort of background checks are done when hiring, law enforcement officers. And it could be something that's done, across the county, a survey that's done to start the conversation. I think that there's a way that that could be done at the greater RJOB to sort of add a spotlight to it to more individuals outside the county.
I'm receptive to that. My thought also connected with this is that yes, I think consistent with what Stephanie was saying too, that this really is something, in order for there to be any sort of action taken, would need to go to the full body, which in turn would make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. If there is any sort of content to come to the full body for their consideration on the issue, to the extent that that can be primed, I think is good. And also, I don't want to be going far off in a direction that is beyond ours. To your point, Jill, that it's not in our work plan. I think it's true, and also that we are, since we're receiving information from community, that we have that fluidity in terms of what our work is, and it may, if it is the position of the subcommittee to pivot and or take on additional work, that there is that capacity. So, or at least discretion. My thought would be, let's come back where I'm proposing and see what others think on it, to come back next month not having a report requested, just for preliminary discussion at this group, and to decide whether we might wish to come to the full body and request a report there at the quarterly. What do others think?
I think generally the pattern has been with things like this, right? If something's going to happen at the full body level, usually it comes from a subcommittee, right? So there is the need for a subcommittee to make a request, or to draft something that the body looks at and says yes, no, change this and that, and move forward with it. So I do think there is a step in between, right? I think there is some pre-work if we're going to take this on that would need to happen, and could be agendized, so that next time we see the full body, we've thought about this, we can give them our thoughts, they can take it from there. If they decide to approve it, it goes forward.
Thanks, Chris. Others? Stephanie, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I did, but I agree with Chris.
Okay. I do as well, for what that's worth, and would say that, it gives us the chance, I think, Chris, you were basically saying this, that perhaps between now and the next monthly meeting, we all have our independent discussions in our circles and learn that this isn't something that we want to take on before it does go to the full body, and or it can have some development to make an informed next step. As I was doing before, I'll just have invitation to Kiki and Marcus if you want to have further statement on our next step. No pressure, just invitation. Okay. So that's what I'm going to propose, is that it's on the agenda next time. And if there's no objection to that, then we'll see where this goes. and it can inform our step, if any, to the full body, which would be necessary in order to take any sort of meaningful action content. So this is very preliminary, but we're receiving the information from Crawford on something that I think does fit within the general ambit of what this group does, but should be doing in response to issues that are deeply related to racial justice and law enforcement altogether. So thank you again for bringing this to us and taking the time to do that. And we'll move forward. Then, is there any other public comment? All right. I know we did go a bit into that time, and I also feel in a way that we've gone a little bit quickly last time, which is not a problem, but I want to be able to use this time when we can, and enough said for me on that. How about the record of actions from last time, April 8th? I'll just have just scroll through, focusing on my screen the content from the record of actions of last time in April. Okay. So just the basics of if you were here, make sure that you were, etc. And I don't have anything that I would propose to change. We can always have the full content detail on the video recording, which I'm like, I love that video recording feature. I'm glad that we have it. It's terrific to be able to capture all the content without having to rewrite what the content was. So that's my little hooray for that part. Anyone have any questions, changes to the record of actions from last time? Understanding that if you weren't present, there's only so much you can say on it, but not seeing anything, is there a motion to approve the record of actions from last time?
Motion to approve, Stephanie.
Great. Someone said second? Did I hear second? Or no, it didn't already happen. It was just Stephanie was saying the first, and I'll second. How's that? I think I can. Yes. So any discussion on this item before we go ahead and vote?
Can I just ask one question regarding
Yes.
number 4?
Yes.
I noticed that there is, let's see, for the small 2, where Stephanie asked if Melvin could share the responsibility. Is that regarding the JJCC update? And is there an update that you would like from me in his place from the one that I'm on? So yes.
What committee were we supposed to be updating on?
So I think it's
that?
basically letting us know what's happening with JJCC altogether. Because
Okay,
some
just
of us aren't even
generally.
in that
Okay.
group. So yeah.
So yeah, Kiki, you could.
Would you be willing, please?
And that's why I'm asking the question. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what the expectation would be. I do attend the larger JJCC meetings, and as I stated in the introduction, I'm a member of the Prevention and Intervention Subcommittee. So I'm happy to, to give any sort of recap or something like that regarding both of those, if necessary, during future meetings here. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that, so I know that that is now my responsibility.
Thank you.
I thought it was
Okay.
just for the PICE, not for the others, but I don't want to
Okay.
misinform.
No, well, I don't think you're
That's the
wrong in that.
equivalent- That's the equivalent of the engagement committee for JJCC to this one.
That makes perfect
Yeah, wrong.
sense. That makes perfect sense.
I think
So
that's
can-
why he picked you, Melvin, is his replacement, I believe,
I
is
think
because you
so.
were on that one, but maybe I'm wrong.
That makes perfect sense. So I can just be prepared to update us on the JJCC PICE. And then if there are any other questions regarding other issues in the larger meeting, I'm happy to recap that well. I'm a good note taker, so I will mark that down on my to-do list. Thank you for
Thank
the
you so much.
clarification.
I know there's got to be a lot on that to-do list, and very appreciative that you would be willing to give us an update. And I think, Nicole, what you were saying is consistent with what I was having in mind, just that it would be primarily that group. But if there's other things that, I heard that our other subgroup is doing this, or we have this other thing going on with the bigger group that happen to be not requiring additional research, but just intel that you can pass on to us that's relevant, would be great. So
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah,
Or do we need to do public comment, possibly? Is there
right. Wondering, is there any other clarification or public comment before we vote on approval? Seeing none, I would then call the vote on the item.
All right, Jeff,
Yes.
Kiki,
I wasn't here, so I'm a little bit unclear on how to vote
I
when I'm
would-
not present.
Hope I wasn't cutting off. I would abstain, or myself usually.
Okay, thank you for that. I abstain.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Marcus.
Yes.
So since we only have 4 of you, the motion can't pass. But I just wanted to call out, even if you weren't here, you can still vote yes. That's been brought up before. If there's like something that you like are unclear about or whatnot in the record of action. So because we only have 4, we need 4 vote for yes.
But isn't an abstention a vote? Meaning, okay, it can't carry the majority on it, something that's of a dispute. Jill, do you have Robert's
Yeah,
rules on
I was
that?
just gonna say, we don't use Robert's rules in the county, but do the bylaws state that to pass a voting, for a vote to pass, it has to be the majority of those present or a majority of the quorum?
I thought it was of, well, wait, meaning those present or of the entire subcommittee meeting?
Right. So the question is, if you have a quorum of the subcommittee, right, whatever that number is that
Right.
makes a quorum, do you need a majority of those present, or do you actually need a full vote count of the quorum of the body?
I would think that it's of those present, but that's off the cuff. I don't have that.
I'm looking it up right now. We can move on to the next agenda item while I research that if you like.
Okay, then I would,
We have some other voting items on here as well, and so I probably should get that cleared up.
thank you. Perfect. This may be the only one that is requiring kind of backtracking to a certain extent to weigh in on what happened before being present. And also, I think it makes sense for us to put this in the parking lot, so to speak. We'll come back to this item, or bicycle lot, as I just had it at different training, so we'll return. And that will bring us to, back on our agenda, standing agenda item from JJCC. So we gave you absolutely no notice, Kiki, but if there is anything that you have kind of top of mind to be able to pass on, that'd be fabulous. And
I have our
also,
answer.
Stephanie, do you have from this group or no? It would just, what were you saying? Sorry. Nicole, you were.
I have your answer.
Thank you.
So from a voting standpoint, it's asking for the majority vote of the members present at the meeting to pass. So since we have 4, I guess it would be 3.
Okay, so we're good shape on this one.
We're good shape. You can abstain, Kiki.
No pressure to vote on this one. Excellent. Not that we would ever try to exert pressure on a vote. Right. So anything on the JJCC?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Thank you so much. I know we're calling on you very last minute.
No, it's totally fine. So let's see. I'm just trying to pull up my notes here to remember. Our last PICE subcommittee meeting was May 3rd. We effectively voted to change our meeting times for that subcommittee, for anyone who's interested, to the first Monday from 3 to 5, effective June 1. And from that point, they're actually going to be bi-monthly. So starting June 1st, it will be every other month for PICE. And then we're continuing our outreach process to really put together somewhat of a database of potential programs to use. We tried this before. I think there was a little bit of confusion out in the world amongst us about what the list was. My understanding is we got a lot of contacts for programs that are already in use. What we're looking for is any kind of service provider potential program that we might be able to add to the list of service providers that we use, anything from the small sort of mom and pop organization to something big. So lots of us, I know I did, sent out emails to our potential connects to ask what kind of services they use. And certainly if any of you have any ideas, we're open to it. And we're supposed to be returning in those results actually tomorrow, I believe is the deadline. So just a list of contact information for potential providers and what kind of service they provide. And I think that is about it. That was the bulk of the meeting.
Thank you. That's really helpful for us to know, and I'm glad that we're barely under the window. If there are things that specific ideas that folks have in mind to add, we have still the chance to do that.
And what I'll do actually is I can just type my email address right now in the chat. So if you think of anything between now and tomorrow at close of business, just shoot me the contact information and I can add it to the list.
Perfect.
And I just do want to say that I know Chris has talked to RDA, and so there has been communication between both of these bodies, the general our job as well as JJCC, because diversion is also creating a list of resources. And so the point of creating this inventory is also to get a better idea of what services are being provided, what young people are being supported, and getting a better idea of where those services are actually located. And this will also tie into some of the work that's going in with the DJJ realignment process as well.
Oh, wait, classic, unmute. I was also trying to give the thumbs up, but you saw. Yes, that was my intention. Others? Comment? Or other action to take before we move to next? All right. Or public comment on this item. Right, we're having public comment as for each of our agenda items is the plan. So, not seeing at this moment. Also, just said for Crawford or other just general purpose, kind of taken a more flexible approach to public comment. If there was something that was important, someone wanted to raise, it's not on the agenda and they didn't have a chance earlier, that we'll try to take it if there's time and not kind of be overly rigid on when information can be presented because people have different demands on their time to be able to be here. But not seeing anything at the moment, let's move to our draft of Community Capacity Fund guidelines. All right. I think I need to propose that we all have 90 seconds of meditation as I send an email to someone who is urgently needing to have it from County Council, and I understand that it must be received. So between 3:45 and 3:47, let's all have our me time, and I'm going to have to take this tiny break to send this to this other person. I'm sorry. Is that all right? Even if it's not, it has to happen. I'm sorry. So, Chris, another person who wishes to step in at this moment rather than just silence. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Jury trial. That's all I have as my explanation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I can go.
Go, Jeff. Just go.
Yeah,
Turn your
can
video
go
off, just go.
I mean, I wrote these, so don't have any problem with going over them. It's just like basically any other draft of anything that you all have seen from me at this point. It's me trying my best to capture you guys' thoughts, rationale, your needs, as you express them, and to present them back to you for you guys to look at and tell me what you think. So this is about how the Community Capacity Fund should operate, what its sort of goals and considerations should be in terms of who is, considered and how that consideration is offered. And I will stop sort of setting it up and share with you so you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, so right now, still pretty short. I don't know if we need to add much to this or if we need to change what's here, but I think you all at this point know to feel pretty comfortable making whatever changes need to be made, right? Like I typed the best that I could, so I'm not married to any of this. Any of these words are malleable per what you all think, what you need, in order to make sure that the overall goals of the Community Capacity Fund are met, or at least that we set it up well in terms of sharing this with, say, a board of supervisors or a similar group to say this is what we want that Community Capacity Fund to operate like.
I mean, I think it captures what we've discussed in past meetings. I don't have any additions or edits.
Hi, everyone. Back with my attention, and I know the business has been continuing, so thank you, everyone, for understanding, and I'm seeing where we are. Last comments I think I was hearing were no proposed changes, that this is consistent with what we were talking over. Other thoughts? I'm going to maybe just kind of point a couple words that I'm wanting to make sure kind of could be interpreted different ways and want to make sure we're all on the same page with, or do we want to refine? No need to have disagreement on anything if there isn't any, but I just kind of want to make sure that we are really at consensus on all the concepts. When we say supports to youth, adult and youth community members, I'm thinking of that as broadly defined in age as anyone might define it, meaning that there's no too young, there's no too old, that this is really with that mindset, because there are different definitions, youth, and I'm not sure that that's consistent. Maybe I'm being overly formal, but kind of imagining that this is complete broad spectrum in terms of who might be, like, for example, are we talking early childhood education stuff? Well, that could be important for family and the sorts of needs that family have to have. Then I'm just kind of putting this to mind of how broad, if any, do we want to be in our thinking of that at this point, or we can get to it later, but just kind of inviting any thoughts on that and or on this first paragraph, but just kind of point by point if we can to touch base. Any thoughts on that?
Are you saying that you feel that it's too broad? I don't.
No, I feel like it sounds very broad to me, and I just want to make sure that like we're all agreeing that this is like full range is what we have in mind when we're saying that, because some persons later might be like, well, that's not exactly what I thought we meant by that. And I think it's appropriate. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page because, right, there's kind of different interpretations people may have about like, I wasn't really sure that that's the scope of what we're saying, and meaning that this is not the JJCC, and it's always been the case that our work is not just limited to adult. So, right, the case in point, we're talking about the Youth Advisory Council as a continuing project. So, I'm understanding it is broadly defined, and if everyone else is comfortable with that, I can move on to next points. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page with it. Yeah.
I think your point is well taken. My thought was, because this group is tasked with, trying to improve racial equity in both, for both populations, let's say, adult and youth, wanting to make sure that we said something along that line, in hopes that by specifically calling that out, we didn't end up really heavy on one population as opposed to the other. What you might be getting at is that we need to tie it back to these particular justice systems or criminal legal systems or whatever terminology we want to use there, to specify that that's what we're referring to. But that was the thinking.
Okay. Yeah, I think that clarifies, and I feel like worthwhile on my end to have us discussing that or making sure that we are having the same sort of general definitions. And it's also jumping out at me existing community-based organizations and how do people, because folks are like, can I qualify for this? Are we legitimately existing in order to participate? And I would also think broadly defined, trying to have open door, knowing that not everyone is in fact going to be approved to admit, but I kind of feel this way with diversion stuff. It's like at least allow submission of things and then reject it on its merits if it's not good. But that's also whether we want existing to be a real qualifier for people to participate.
I mean, I don't think it's for an organization that's not in existence right now. This is, it's a community-based organization, and I think having it formal and informal speaks to some of the organizations that may not have the person capacity that some other organizations have.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. That clarifies. Keith, you unmuted? Oh yeah, please.
One more thing that I did want to speak to, actually to keep consistent with some of the language that has been drafted in the diversion committee as well. I think it would be good for us to change the end of that sentence into the justice system to the criminal legal system, because we've been using that language with other things.
Mm-hmm. Right, to match up with, I think I'm in favor of, so that we have that sort of consistency. Kiki, you had unmuted.
I did, thank you. I just had a couple of clarifying questions. Stephanie, you actually mentioned one, and obviously I'm playing catch up, so forgive me. When we say both formal and informal, can you give me an idea of what we are specifically differentiating between? In that first paragraph, when we talk about formal and informal CBOs?
Mm-hmm. I think, you have some that are official, like 501c3s, and then you have some folks in the community that may be a church that's doing work in the community, or just a community member that's unofficially doing work in the community and supporting young people or adults, but they don't necessarily have that status of a 501c3. And so even with the community capacity fund, one of the things could be some of the supports that they need is how do they officially become a 501c3 and getting some support in building that up.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
no,
that makes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just add that's a huge component. When you're talking about providing people with resources that they need so that they are not entering the system or not re-entering the system. A lot of it is, quite frankly, a lot of the organizations and a lot of the resources are not organizations, resources, or spaces that necessarily are well known to the system. And so it's too important a group potentially not to include.
I
Thanks,
agree.
Kiki.
I just was asking because I wonder if, I just wanted to know what our definition of formal and informal was, and was wondering if there's any way to make it more clear to the small, family-based kind of organization or program so that they know that this includes them as well. So when you mentioned the 501c3, I'm wondering if there is an official, a more official word or title or something that we might use so that it's clear that we're saying you don't have to be a licensed sort of nonprofit organization in order to be considered here. Because I love it. And I actually, when I said something earlier, I referred to them as the mom and pops organizations, but I get it now with that explanation. So I was just wondering if that is clear enough to everybody that would read this and was trying to identify whether or not they fall into this category. Because really we're saying any and everybody who's providing a service can be considered. And then my second sort of question is, have we identified who sort of the lead is to manage these applications and build this capacity as we move through this?
So let me respond to that. Right, you're saying Stephanie, no. Right, we're in like the really beginning stages of development in this, and it's kind of what would this model be before we're taking it to the next steps. And at our last quarterly meeting, we kind of got buy-in on, we're thinking about this two-stage process and moving it ahead because this is something that came to us from the task force as a recommendation to work on this community capacity fund thing, and this will be part of your subcommittee work. So we've been running with that and building step by step, and this is kind of further informing what it might be like, but definitely not yet in terms of what the structure will be beyond kind of really where we are here. I'll also just say as context that we agreed as the oversight body at the last meeting that we would request or propose to the Board of Supervisors that we have some technical assistance to move from where we are now to a more solid proposal to the next step. So not actually to do the content work, but like, how do we get to a real solid model so that this can move forward? And then where exactly, when exactly that happens, I don't know. But meaning like, when would that actually come before the Board of Supervisors? Not sure, but we made our proposal, and right. Hopefully that's responding to what you were, the last point, Kiki, and then the first one, I think maybe there is additional language that we could add that would be clarifying that this is an open door, that's saying you don't need to be a licensed or registered or incorporated, something like that to say.
Yeah, that's what I just don't know what's the actual appropriate word to use. I would have to do a little Googling, but
Yeah.
but I'm wondering if that would make it super clear, that we are very much trying to be all inclusive of all levels of service providers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's a good idea to do a little brainstorming on that. Marcus?
Kiki, could I, if maybe the language in the last paragraph that, will consider the goals and potential of each program, even if the application lacks polish, in comparison to that of a more experienced CBO. I mean, I know that it's, well, the whole sentence, that the fund will be inclusive of applicants which may be less experienced with the RFP process. But I see what you're saying. Does that help, maybe in your mind, get to where you want to be a little more?
It does. I think what would be even a little more helpful was if we somehow tied what our definition of formal and informal is into that section. Does that make sense? So if we said, let me just ramble something off the top of my head, will be inclusive of, maybe if we said formal and informal applicants, which may be blah, 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 you know what I mean? Like somehow tied it in so that it's clear that that's what our definition of formal and informal is. Because Jeff made a good point just starting to discuss this, that the language could be received many different ways. And we all work for organizations that we tend to make up our own definitions of words as well. So that can be further confusing. So I'm just wondering, maybe that will be the answer, to just somehow tie the formal and informal piece into that last section.
Yeah, I like that. Just kind of bringing these worlds together, Mark, is what you're saying. There's a little more content there. We can use that as the space where we can better define, and maybe we leave further wordsmithing of this to an updated draft that'll be at our next meeting, is kind of where I'm thinking, but this certainly shapes where we would go with it. Well, so I'm inclined to, keeping in mind all the proposed edits to this first paragraph, and I suppose the last one, other things that we might want to have consideration: regions and or municipalities kind of with programmatic needs. Let's see. Wondering if, here's how just trying to say it as directly as I can. When there are sort of trial pilot resources for something that's cool in the county, my concern is always that it's going to some place that doesn't need it most. And I think that's what this is trying to, which I'm not saying happens all the time. I'm saying that that's a bad outcome that sometimes can happen and doesn't always. So I think this is trying to address that with programmatic needs. But maybe there's a way that can be more specifically saying that, because every place has programmatic needs when they're looked closely. Even the wealthiest of places do have. But places that have been historic and current places that are most disproportionately impacted by racism racial injustice but some way to get to the gist of that there are places that have been hit harder, and that if there are investments to be made, that those places should get the investments first.
That was another one of my questions. Thank you. Is I wanted to understand what our definition of programmatic needs is. Like, what are we aiming for? So that your comment cleared that up. So I wonder too if there's some more specific, because it sounds like we would like to help those who would be more often overlooked or disadvantaged, or at some kind of disproportionate level of receiving the support. So I think maybe a little bit more description there might be helpful as well.
Thanks, Kiki. Others' thoughts on how we might or might not make a modification here? Hi, Cheryl. I'll just say welcome, of course. And for context, we're looking at our capacity fund guidelines. I see that thumb up, so glad you're here. Right. Others' thoughts on programmatic needs? Even if we're not going to quite work that out right now, but anyone feels like, yeah, that does need modification, and or it's fine as it is.
I think I don't understand. I think I maybe don't understand what's being raised around this particular paragraph.
Yeah. Well, meaning the discussion we're having, or
Yeah.
all of it. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like we're talking about money and attention training from the county that's going to go to orgs in all around the county that could provide meaningful services. And I feel like historically, and I'm saying in generality, that East and West have been the places in the county that have most dramatically needed this sort of investment, knowing that there's different pockets, but how explicit do we want to be? Are we thinking that this should be places that have been either having disproportionately high arrest rates or having greater rates of prosecution, having something that's making specific to, because, right, I guess there will be some sense of, well, who's going to get into the first and second tier of this to get money and training? And all places have needs, and I'm wondering if it is, if this is enough to make sure that we just don't have every different city should get an equal sort of say in this. And I'm like, well, no, not every single city in Contra Costa is similarly impacted here. So we should have a sense of, right? And maybe this paragraph is doing that, but it might not be as phrased. So do you see what I'm meaning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I guess what I'm thinking about is because we're looking at the individual organization and what they're doing and what their specific needs are. So essentially, I mean, you could have an organization that's in, let's say, Concord, but maybe they do actually serve people that are in East County, but they actually need to build their capacity. And so, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I'm just, yeah, I'm not really sure how this would change or what it needs to be changed to.
I think, Stephanie, can you expand on like what an example, like, because you started to just now, and that would be helpful for me. If you could expand on an example of what you see this section meaning, or what it's saying that we would do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that we definitely want to take into, like it says, take into consideration organizations that are applying for this and where they're located.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think one of the main things that we're looking at is the organization and what they're trying to do and what capacity needs to be built. And so you could potentially have someone that isn't in an, let's just say, a region that we deem maybe a high need, but they're actually serving people in that region, but maybe they're not located in that region. And so I guess that's why I'm trying to figure out how exactly this would be worded to, I don't know.
Well,
So
yeah. Kiki.
So the goal is, so like if there was, let's say, a program in, I don't know, Walnut Creek, but they were providing a service to Richmond. Are you saying that that is the kind of equitable support that we would be providing? Because I think when I read it, it was maybe it's just moving the word equitably that is confusing, but I want to make sure I understand the intention, and that's what's not clear when I read it. So you're saying that we're considering who you're serving, not necessarily where you're located. Is that?
I mean, I think they'll naturally fall into like the high need areas anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining that most of the folks that would probably apply for something like this and that need to build their capacity, they're gonna naturally be in West County and East County.
Because I think when I read it, I thought what it was saying was it was based more on we're basically trying to help an organization sort of build up their own capacity to support, because maybe they're not a large, heavily funded, organization. And I thought it might be a different thing. So I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
no, I
understand
mean,
the
that
intention.
is it, but we've also, yeah, that is it. I mean, that is
Okay.
about building capacity, but I also, part of what we've discussed too, is that there's probably going to be different levels of capacity building. And the needs of different organizations are going to look different depending on where they are in their development. And so technically you could probably have somebody that needs a lot of support and would need to be, and we talked about a tiered system, need to be in both tiers of the system. And then you may have another organization that doesn't necessarily need as heavy support as a smaller organization, but there is some type of support that they need. And so part of this isn't just a blanket, like we're going to support you in one specific way. I think part of this is also figuring out how you do an assessment of an organization to figure out what are those capacity needs. So it's going to be broad, I think.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I feel like it is worth taking the time, and that we're thinking through these different parts. It's Stephanie, what you're saying, and just this general discussion of making sure we're not going to be cutting out something that's important because it doesn't fit within some sort of box. There's a number of different orgs in Central that could be listed right now. My top just comes to my mind is Monument Impact. But there's a lot that could be like, well, this is really actually providing services for people in need all over. And that this stuff is slippery. And I think we've been around in different spaces. And boy, I hate it when I'm with client or family member of client or something. And it's like, doesn't the money always go to different places? It never comes to this community. So I want to make sure that it does go to the places that don't get the services. That's what this should really be all about. But a way that it's written in, which I think what we're doing here is trying to bake it in so that, yeah, the door is open to an aspiring group in Blackhawk. And that's not what this was about. We wrote the guidelines that that's not what this was meant to be. This is supposed to be providing desperately needed services in these areas that are defined in the ways that we're talking. So maybe there's a little bit more tweaking to incorporate this conversation, bearing in mind that we don't want it to have it so restrictive that it's going to be tying our hands unnecessarily, kind of thinking back to a conversation and some discussion that maybe last time we had, Marcus, you had made some comment about, we don't want to be painting ourselves into a box here in a way, into a corner, I think is the phrase. Mixing my metaphors. We have 15 minutes left, right? Let me just do a breather and say, looking at where is our next item on agenda, and do we want to keep moving in this item and or look at to share data publicly?
I think it would be good for us to go ahead and, since we're already in it, just go ahead and finish.
Okay.
Like if there's any changes, I don't know if we're going to be able to vote on it because we do have a couple of changes, or maybe it's voting with an amendment with some of the changes, but I do think we should just kind of power through this. We only have a couple of more paragraphs.
Okay. I'm receptive to that too. And even if it's not ultimately a vote, it will get us that much closer to the final the goal here.
And Jeff, excuse me, I just want to, I have about 5, maybe 10 minutes before I have to get another meeting started. So If we're going to vote, we should move in that direction. Will we still have quorum when I leave? Or
I'm
no?
not certain, and also we're only going until 4:30.
Oh, that's true. Well, I've
But
got to
I'm
be gone
meaning,
5 minutes before.
even if you do need to leave before,
Okay.
I think we'll be able to have some further discussion. But Stephanie?
I think we will have quorum since Cheryl is on.
I don't have Cheryl as a voting member in this
No, this is
particular.
subcommittee. I think you're
Oh,
diversion,
darn.
right, Cheryl?
Definitely a.
Yes, I'm on
our job.
diversion. I'm just attending because I like you so much.
Ms. Extra credit. Always.
Extra credit.
Yes.
And I apologize that I'm late, but you know it's an Islamic holiday today, so I had to enjoy the fact that Ramadan is over.
Yeah, happy Eid.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So yeah, let's keep on then. And Marcus, maybe I'll just give you the microphone if you want, knowing that you have little time. If there's some, any additional piece that you want to add at this time. Okay, just knowing we're
There's
wrapping up
no
in
additional
our,
pieces. I think that I appreciate trying to clarify some of the language that we came up with. I just want to make sure that we are, that we just don't add anything that will, discourage those small, I think Kiki said mom and pop organizations from applying for this. And I just want it on the record that if there's a way, and once we start doing this, to encourage the larger CBOs to help, I don't know if that's a mentoring or what we can do to help others create the capacity in the smaller, less experienced CBOs. There's a couple on the top of my head from Richmond that I think could use that kind of guidance. And so hopefully this will be, whatever we come up with will allow that to happen.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I think what you're describing makes me think of the kind of the cohort portion of the first phase, of that there will be some sort of expected learning component, support component that will be built into this, that will be kind of a peer aspect. Kiki, you had unmuted?
I'm sorry. I think I've been unmuted this whole time because I keep having questions.
No, that's okay.
But no, I absolutely agree. And that's why I think the language is super important to me, because I want to make sure that any average, lay person, if you will, could read it and believe that it applies to them. So I have a proposal maybe, because we talked so much about the second one. Based on what I heard, the explanations, thank you, Stephanie. What if we said, what if we just came right out and said it and said something like the Community Capacity Fund will provide individualized support to community-based organizations throughout the county, taking into consideration regions and/or municipalities within the county with programmatic needs that have not been equitably supported.
Mm-hmm. Right, moving that equitably at the end to kind of clarify which groups we're talking about with programmatic needs.
Right.
Right. There was more there too. You said individualized, which I thought was good to add.
Typing that in the chat for us, Kiki, or sending an email so we can make sure we.
Oh, yep, I sure can.
But
I'll be definitely watching this again later to capture
right.
all the changes.
I like that, and I think we can have that as be basically, if not exactly that concept of defining equitably there, and given the time, everything, I want to just jump to the next paragraph for culturally relevant programs and services and diverse program staff. This is the third paragraph. I am having an inclination to thinking about, having not have fully thought through, do we want to define diversity, including but not limited to those formerly incarcerated, persons of color? There's certain kind of like meaningful or guiding what are we meaning with diversity, because this again can be broadly defined as can culturally relevant. So is there something that we want to specify, or a way that we want to specify to try to make sure that we're having everybody receive the services who we want to? Chris? Just so you were unmuted.
Oh, I
Okay.
think I was still unmuted from asking to put the comments in there.
Okay. What do people think about diverse? Leave it as is, articulate something more specific.
Yeah, we can definitely specify in terms of.
Yeah, I think we can specify. I don't think it has to be too long, but I do think that we can have something short in there.
Thank you for adding to chat. That looks great, Kiki. Thank you.
Did you say, Jeff, that with program staff that have lived experience, is that what you were?
Right. I was saying formerly incarcerated, but lived experience, something to that effect.
I love a lived experience, so I'll just throw that out there and be quiet.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that it can be meaningful to specify. And maybe we can use as a jumping off point some of the benchmarks for representation that we have on this group, because the oversight body does have some expectation in terms of, or a prioritization type language that we have for inclusivity that we might want to try to have as aspirational language here. And again, we're probably not going to finalize at this moment as much as kind of getting the general tenor of this would be good to put some more specifics on to make sure that we're capturing the population, the persons that we want to. Other thoughts? Invitation, no expectation. Crawford, you're here, member of public, not just invitation to chime in if you'd like to, but no expectation of that.
Well, hey, just interesting discussion. And if I went back, not to the first paragraph, I think it was the second or third paragraph, the only thing I could come up with would be developing and mature CBOs is maybe some possible words that you could throw in, just kind of going with the flow here. But God, interesting conversation. Love it.
Great. Thank you. And those are welcome suggestions of developing mature, formal, informal. That helps kind of, the door is open, right? But we're encouraging and really trying to show that it is encouraging. So that is good specifying kind of inclusive language. Thank you. Other thoughts on maybe specifically the diverse language, and trying to think the other that I'm scrolled down right now on that third paragraph. Or shall we move to our final paragraph? Yep, thanks, Chris. Culturally relevant was the other language that I was wondering, is that sticky? Do we want to try to get to something more specific of what do we mean by culturally relevant? I feel like my sense there is if you're reaching the target groups in the places by persons who are if we hit the diverse component, I suppose, in a meaningful way, then culturally relevant may be addressed. That just seems so hard to define in advance of what, but I guess I haven't really attempted that in other spaces. Have other folks tried to nail that down in a different JJCC, anywhere else about like, and when we say culturally relevant, this is what we mean, because I know I've also been present for other spaces where there's some eye rolling about culturally relevant, like what are they even talking about? Like, I don't know. Is there a way to nail that down that has helped?
I think so. So I think we could change it, or I could change it to say, we're looking for programs, services, and staff which are reflective of the communities or racial and ethnic makeup of the justice system, or the folks currently in the justice system.
Yeah, I like that. Of course, I'd never give you this feedback before we're at the meeting, and then I'm like looking at it more in detail. But that's great.
I like that too, and I think it encompasses the possibility that there could also be shifts, and so you know what I mean. So in the future, we might be focused some other place, and it encompasses the change that is possible as well.
Yeah, I like that. I'm wondering if there is a need to benefit in thinking explicitly also about, I mean, there's no reason why it doesn't capture, but communities with language access issues, basically just making sure that this is also, and not just Spanish, right? We're really thinking of like all different groups that may not be getting access to funding, et cetera, because of those sorts of other barriers that, may not be as structural as some of the things we're talking about and have these, I don't know. It's kind of outside of my area of expertise, frankly, like what that looks like in terms of speaking to in this. But I'm wondering if it's appropriate for us to have some thought on, right, language and immigrant population is really what I'm thinking.
I think that saying it the way that Christopher suggested would also encompass the language issues and whatever else, even, and I've defined culture as many things, right? So we could be addressing all sorts of different types of cultures, including like LGBTQ and other underrepresented populations in the justice system. So I think that language would encompass all of the things that come under the umbrella of the culture.
Yeah, I think you're right. And maybe those are our last words for the meeting, because we're at just 4:30 now, and I will return that message shortly. But I think I'm not going to propose that we have a vote on this as much as we're going to come back and continue to work. And since we're at time, I don't know if there's anything more that I would say. Final words, anyone? Before we.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I do have a question. Just quickly on the vote that we were going to have for the Youth Advisory Council about the follow-up meeting, is the thought, because we talked about meeting, but is the thought to have the follow-up meeting in this capacity of our monthly meeting or a separate meeting?
I was thinking it would be separate, not at our subcommittee time.
Okay. Why were we voting on it?
So that is essentially a catch-all word that I put.
Okay, got it.
Agenda item. Thus, if something comes up that we need to vote on, we can do it. So sometimes I put it in places where it doesn't seem like it may go, because you never know. But yeah, mostly we just wanted to to discuss scheduling that, and also quickly, I just wanted to put everybody on notice that Stephanie, you were offering to to personally take a step back from that meeting while helping to coordinate it, because we were running into quorum issues with how many folks from this group we were going to have in that meeting, and then it would have needed to be a public meeting and be agendized and all this other stuff. And so to avoid that, because we were thinking we would have Apollo, right? Like when we were having this conversation. So Jeff, Apollo, Stephanie, all in the meeting we were cutting it close. And so I think what quorum is 4. Was there somebody else that we were?
I think so. I think there was another
Noe.
person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was the chief.
Yeah, that's right.
So that would have had us at 4, and that was the issue. And so just wanted to put everyone on notice that was maybe the fix, is that Stephanie was going to have folks from Rise there, but have them go in her stead so that we didn't run into that issue.
Thank you, Stephanie, for being willing
You
to.
are welcome. I'll still continue to coordinate, and so I'll be in touch with when we can set something up.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we are at time. So I appreciate everyone's time and attention to this work as always. And we will be back for our next meeting, June 10th, 3 to 4:30.
And I'm just to let you know, I'm off that week, so I will not be here.
And you will be missed.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.